Faith can save your soul, but sometimes it costs your fortune. I never thought the church would come for me. When my husband died, the world collapsed into silence. 40 years of shared mornings, empty chairs, and echoes where laughter used to live. People say grief makes you vulnerable, and I suppose that's when the wolves began to circle. Only these wolves did not bare their teeth. They smiled. They prayed. And they carried Bibles. Pastor Caldwell arrived on a spring afternoon, sunlight glowing behind him like a halo. His voice was syrup smooth, his smile gentle enough to disarm suspicion. When he took my hand, his touch was warm, firm, and rehearsed. "Don't worry, sister," he said, eyes brimming with practiced compassion. "The Lord provides for those who give freely. Your generosity will not go unnoticed." It sounded like comfort at the time. But later, I realized those were not words of faith. They were words of warning. After the funeral, I found myself in church more than ever. The pew smelled of wood polish and candle wax, and for a while, I convinced myself that the hymns filled the emptiness I could not face. The congregation welcomed me with open arms, maybe too open. Every Sunday, they saved me a front row seat. Every Wednesday, someone checked in. And every Friday, just before supper, Pastor Caldwell would appear at my door. "Just thought I had stopped by," he would say with a grin, setting his Bible gently on the table. He stayed for hours, weaving sermons about generosity, sacrifice, and the eternal reward of giving. His words dripped with honey, but I could never tell what he was sweetening. And when the loneliness crept in, when the nights were too quiet and the walls too wide, his voice was a lifeline. Or so I thought. My children were less convinced. They had come by after one of his visits, exchanging looks across the dinner table as the pastor poured himself another glass of sweet tea. When he left, my daughter could not hold back. "Mom, don't you think he is coming around a little too much?" I smiled, brushing her off. "He is just being kind. He cares about my soul." My son leaned back, arms crossed. "Or maybe he cares about your will." I wanted to scold him. I wanted to say he was being cynical. But something in his tone left an echo that did not fade when the dishes were done. Pastor Caldwell had a way of turning faith into a transaction. "Your home," he said one evening, tracing the carved banister my husband had built, "is a temple. Imagine if it could serve the Lord after you are gone. Imagine how many souls could find salvation here." His words painted holy pictures, pews for my parlor stood, hymns echoing down my hallways. But his tone, that was ownership. Then came the promises, whispered, intimate, dangerous. "Give to the Lord, and he will multiply it tenfold for your children. Sacrifice on earth, and your name will be written forever in heaven's book." True faith, he breathed, so close I could smell the cologne on his collar, is giving when it hurts. Each phrase was a fishing line, and I could feel the hook tighten every time I nodded. And yet, I wanted to believe. Grief makes fools of even the wise. My children started noticing more than I wanted to admit. "Mom," my daughter said after Sunday service, "why do they keep asking about your house? About your savings?" "They were just being friendly," I replied, forcing a laugh. But even I could hear the false note in my voice. Because deep down, I felt it too, that strange shift in tone when they said my name. The way Pastor Caldwell smiled did not quite reach his eyes anymore. Still, I let it continue. The attention felt good. It filled the silence my husband's absence left behind. But faith built on loneliness is a dangerous kind. It was raining the night they came. A slow, heavy rain that blurred the world beyond my porch. When I opened the door, there stood Pastor Caldwell, flanked by two deacons, their black umbrellas dripping onto the welcome mat my husband had bought years ago. "We won't take much of your time," he said, shaking the rain from his coat. The three of them stepped inside, forming a half circle by the fire. Their clothes steamed. Their smiles did not. I poured tea out of habit, hands trembling only slightly. They declined. Instead, the pastor placed his leather briefcase on my table, opened it, and drew out a thick stack of papers tied neatly with ribbon. "These," he said softly, sliding them toward me, "are just a formality. Nothing to worry about. Simple arrangements to ensure your legacy serves the Lord." I hesitated. "What kind of arrangements?" He smiled, wider than he ever had before. "Too wide." "Don't worry, sister," he said, his voice smooth as rain on glass. "Your name will be remembered in heaven." His fingers lingered on the papers, nudging them closer. Ink, signatures, clauses, none of that made sense in the dim firelight, but I could feel something sinister breathing beneath the surface. The clock ticked loudly behind him. The rain battered the windows like a warning. For the first time, I looked into Pastor Caldwell's eyes and saw it, the truth that had been there all along. Behind that practiced warmth was calculation. Behind that reverence was hunger. Every visit, every prayer, every verse, it had all been leading here, to this moment. To my table. To my name. The church had not come to save me. They had come to own me. As the fire popped in the hearth, his pen gleamed in the lamplight. He leaned back in his chair, still smiling, waiting for me to sign. And that was the moment my faith cracked, not in God, but in men who wore his words like armor. The rain outside turned to thunder. My hand hovered over the page. And as his eyes watched every breath I took, one truth whispered through my mind: he was not offering me heaven. He was trying to take my home. Underscore, 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 underscore. Not every contract is written in ink. Some are written in manipulation. The storm rattled the windows as thunder rolled over the hills, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside me. I stared at the papers the pastor slid across the table, pages thick and heavy, their corners still warm from his hands. On top, bold letters read, "Transfer of assets in the spirit of divine generosity." At first, I thought I was seeing it wrong. My glasses slipped down my nose. I leaned closer, blinking through the candlelight. But no, the words did not lie. These papers were not about prayer, or salvation, or service to the Lord. They were about ownership. My ownership. And what they wanted was everything. "Of course, it's voluntary," Pastor Caldwell said smoothly, his smile stretching like butter over burnt toast. "But it's the Lord's will that those who have been blessed should bless others." I skimmed the paragraphs, my pulse thudding in my ears. They called it a donation, a gift of faith, a sacrifice in service to the kingdom. But hidden inside that syrupy language was the truth, the kind you could choke on. My home. My land. My savings. Everything my husband and I built together. The moment I signed, it would all belong to the church. Every brick he laid with his own hands. Every tree we planted behind the porch. Every dollar we scraped together through winters and worn-out shoes. Gone with a single stroke of a pen. I swallowed hard, my voice barely steady. "Surely this is not necessary." The pastor leaned forward, his voice like velvet hiding a blade. "Oh, but it is, sister. The Lord calls us to be stewards, not owners. Ownership is an earthly illusion. Peace comes from surrender." The two deacons beside him nodded in perfect unison, silent shadows backing their shepherd. My eyes caught a line that read complete and irrevocable transfer. And suddenly, a memory tore its way through the fog. Years ago, just before my husband died, he sat me down at this very table, the same table now buried under these holy-sounding lies. His hands were rough, his eyes serious. "Listen to me," he said. "There will come a time when they come sniffing around. Men in suits. Men with Bibles. They will smile, they will promise heaven, but what they want is your home. Your name. Your peace." I laughed back then. "Oh, you were just being suspicious." He shook his head slowly. "No, Mary. I have seen them. Promise me you will never sign anything without reading every line. Promise me." And now, here I was, staring at the trap he warned me about. The following days were filled with whispers, slammed doors, and uneasy dinners. My children found out about the Chich's proposal, and it split the house in two. "You should sign, Mom," my eldest daughter pleaded. "Think about your soul. Think about how people will remember you." But my son's hand came crashing down on the table. "This is a con. They were vultures in collars. You sign that, and we lose everything." Voices rose. Plates rattled. The air turned thick with fear and faith colliding. My children were not really arguing about the papers. They were arguing about loss, of money, of control, of me. And through it all, I said nothing. Because I was not ready to fight until I knew exactly what kind of war this was. That night, when the house fell silent, I spread the papers across the kitchen table, my husband's chair still sitting empty across from me. I read every line, every comma, every word that tried to sound righteous but smelled like rot. Legal jargon is a language meant to confuse, but my husband had taught me well. I circled words, drew arrows, and wrote notes in the margins. And slowly, the mask came off. This was not a donation. It was a transfer of control. A trap dressed in piety. They had hidden their poison inside holy phrases. Once I signed, there would be no escape, no reversal, no appeal. Even if I changed my mind the very next day, it would already be theirs. Then, halfway down the 4th page, I saw it, the line that froze my blood. A clause. It read, in the event of the benefactors, "Unexpected passing, all assets, property, and money shall transfer immediately and in totality to the stewardship of the church." Unexpected passing. The word stared back like a warning written in fire. A chill ran through me, and for once, it had nothing to do with the rain outside. The pastor's voice echoed in my mind. "Your soul's eternal peace depends on this. Ownership is an illusion. True faith means surrender." Was it all just talk? Or had it been a plan all along? I looked at that clause again, unexpected passing. Was that legal language, or a prophecy? My husband's face flashed before me. The way he had clutched his chest that night. The way they said it was peaceful. But what if it was not? What if he had seen this coming, and that's why he had warned me? "Faith can save your soul," the pastor once told me. But I was starting to wonder, whose soul was he trying to save? Sunday came with sunshine that felt colder than rain. I put on my best hat, pinned my brooch, and walked into church with my head held high. Pastor Caldwell greeted me at the door with that same honeyed smile. "Sister Mary," he said warmly. "I trust you have been praying on the matter?" I smiled back, my lips tight but steady. "Oh yes, Pastor," I said sweetly. "I have been giving it a great deal of thought." His eyes gleamed. He thought he had won. That his charm in scripture had worked. That the old widow had finally surrendered. But inside, I was already building my plan, brick by brick, like the house my husband left me. Because if there was one thing grief teaches you, it's patience. And I would wait as long as I had to catch a wolf pretending to be holy. That night, I sat by the window as the wind held outside. The lamp flickered, casting shadows over the papers spread before me. My hand traced that single chilling phrase again, "Should she pass unexpectedly, all assets revert immediately to the church." The words seemed to pulse in the light, as though daring me to ignore them. But I could not. Because now I understood something terrible. This was not just about my fortune. It was about my life. And from that moment on, I knew, if Pastor Caldwell wanted a war cloaked in scripture, he was about to get one. They came for my soul with a contract, but they forgot who they were dealing with. Underscore, 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 underscore. The devil does not tempt you with horns, but with a friendly smile. The house was quieter than usual that evening. Grandma sat in her armchair, the ticking clock on the wall her only company. She was pretending to nap, but her ears were sharper than ever. And that's when she heard it, voices. Low. Conspiratorial. whispering just outside her parlor door. At first, she thought it was the neighbors, the ones who came with casseroles and prayers, the kind that always tasted like pity. But now, this voice was different. Familiar. It made her chest tighten like a fist. She leaned forward, barely breathing, straining to hear. "She trusts you," came the smooth voice of Pastor Alden. "Just convince her it's the right thing to do. One signature, that's all we need." And then, her nephew. Her own blood. "She'll listen to me. She always has." Grandma's fingers curled tight around the armrest. Her pulse quickened. Was this real? Had her family, her own kin, been bought like cattle? Her mind spun. Why him? Why now? How much did they promise him to betray me? That night, the family gathered for supper. Bowls of stew steamed at the table, and the old chandelier flickered above them like a trembling witness. Grandma watched her nephew closely. His smile seemed stretched, a little too eager. His laugh, too forced. He kept glancing her way, then looking down, as if the guilt on his face might give him away. When he leaned close and whispered, "Auntie, the pastor's right. You should think about securing your legacy." She felt it, the knife. Not made of steel, but betrayal. Blood could betray just as easily as strangers in robes. Her late husband's words echoed in her head. "It's never the wolves that scare me. It's the sheep who open the door for them." Grandma did not let her heartbreak show. Not a tear. Not a tremor. She smiled instead. "Oh, you might be right," she said sweetly, stirring her spoon. "The pastor does seem to know so much about the good of the community." Her nephew's eyes gleamed. He thought he was winning. Inside, Grandma's fury smoldered like iron in a forge. "They think I am weak. They think age has dulled my mind. But I can play this game better than any of them." She had played it before, when her husband's partners tried to take the mill, when bankers came sniffing after her land. This was no different. Only now, the wolves wore crosses around their necks. Later that night, as she tidied the parlor, her daughter-in-law entered quietly. She looked uneasy, hands wringing a dish towel until it nearly tore. "Mother," she whispered, "something is not right. They are circling you like vultures." Grandma turned slowly, searching her face. Was this genuine concern or another performance? In this house, truth had become a foreign language. She gave a faint nod. "I will keep that in mind." But inside, her thoughts darkened. If one relative can be bribed, can others? This was not just a fight for her estate anymore. It was a war for her family's soul. The next morning, Pastor Alden arrived, all smiles and starch. His shoes gleamed. His Bible tucked under one arm like a weapon disguised as scripture. "Ah, sister," he said warmly, "the Lord rewards cheerful givers. You have been blessed with much, don't you want to share it?" Grandma tilted her head. "And if I don't?" His smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened, cold and hollow. "Then perhaps your blessings will go unremembered," he murmured. "A legacy is only as strong as the stories people tell." Her heart pounded, but her face never showed it. "Oh, don't worry, Pastor. I will pray on it." He left smiling, but she saw through it. That was not faith, that was hunger. That evening, Grandma locked her door and pulled the curtains tight. The air felt heavy, like even the walls were listening. And then she saw it. An envelope slipped under her door. The paper was rough, the handwriting shaky, but the message cut deep. "I know what they are doing. Meet me at midnight." She froze. Who wrote it? Was it a trap or a lifeline? Was it her daughter-in-law, secretly watching the vulture circle? A neighbor who had overheard the wrong prayer? Or one of her own, drowning in guilt? The questions battered her like a storm. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark window, calm, unblinking, unbroken. Her life, her fortune, her very legacy, all hanging by a thread. But she had a choice. Go to that meeting, or let them strip her world bare. Her hand tightened on the note. If they think I'm blind, let me show them I still see. Midnight approached. The clock struck 12. Grandma wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped out into the night. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets like dying prayers. At the far corner of the property, a shadow waited. Still. Watching. Her voice trembled as she called out into the dark. Who are you? And why should I trust you? The figure stepped closer, face hidden beneath the brim of a hat, and whispered, because if you don't, they will take everything before dawn. Underscore, 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 underscore. Every battle needs an ally, but sometimes allies come from the shadows. The figure at the edge of Grandma's property stepped into the moonlight. His face was carved with time, worn, lined, tired, yet his eyes burned with the urgency of a man who had seen too much and waited too long to speak. Mrs. Hale, he whispered, his breath fogging in the chill air. I don't have much time. My name's Daniel. I used to work for them. Grandma's spine stiffened. Work for whom? The church, he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder. I was their accountant. Her stomach tightened like a clenched fist. She studied him closely, the frayed cuffs of his coat, the faint smell of ink and old tobacco, the calluses of a man who had handled both tools and sins. And why, she asked evenly, should I trust you? Daniel pressed his lips into a thin line. He reached into his coat, withdrew a folded packet of papers, and placed it gently into her trembling hands. Because, he said, voice low and urgent, I know exactly what they are doing to you, and I know what they have already done to others. Minutes later, they sat in her kitchen. The lantern's flame flickered against the walls, throwing their shadows long and strange. Daniel's hand shook as he lifted the teacup she had set before him. I was with them for 12 years, he began, his voice hoarse. At first, I believed in the mission, tithes, charity, the Lord's work. But it wasn't about faith, sister. It was about control. He leaned closer, lowering his tone. I saw the ledgers. I signed the false statements. They told me to adjust the figures, to hide where the money went. Estates. Farms. Trust funds. All drained under the name of righteousness. They had been taking from widows for years. Grandma's heart pounded. And the others? She asked softly. Daniel's gaze dropped. Buried under paper and prayer. Their families silenced. Some gave everything willingly. Others didn't live long enough to regret it. He slid the packet across the table. Grandma's fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Photocopies of deeds, forged wills, transfers with the church seal, all carefully marked and dated. She drew in a sharp breath. These are proof. Daniel nodded grimly. Enough to expose them, but not enough to protect you. Once they know you have seen this, they will come. They always do. She folded the papers back into the envelope, her mind already racing ahead. This wasn't just a spiritual war anymore. It was a hunt. And she was their target. The next morning, her nephew appeared at the door. All smiles and practiced warmth. Auntie, he said cheerfully, Pastor Alden asked if you are ready to finalize things. Maybe today's the day? Grandma smiled, gentle and slow. Maybe, dear. Maybe. But in his eyes, she saw it, not confidence, but panic. The pastor was tightening his leash. The betrayer was cracking. That afternoon, her daughter-in-law found her in the garden, hands buried in the soil. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Mother, please, don't fight them. You can't win. They are too powerful. Grandma didn't look up. And if I give them everything, will that make them merciful? Her daughter-in-law's silence was its own confession. Fear had rooted itself deep into this family, some willing to bow, others too frightened to breathe. And some, Grandma realized grimly, might go further than she dared imagine. That night, when the house fell silent, Grandma worked by candlelight. The flame flickered as she copied Daniel's papers by hand. One set she hid in a flour tin. Another beneath the lining of her sewing box. The third, she slid into the hollow leg of her husband's old desk. Never keep one truth in one place, her husband used to say. Secrets are only safe when they are scattered like seeds. Her hands were steady, but her heart trembled. Every groan of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every whisper of wind outside felt like someone breathing against the glass. If they find out I have this, she thought, they won't stop at words. The following night, Daniel returned. His face was pale, his breath uneven, his eyes darting between the shadows like a hunted man. They know, he whispered the moment she opened the door. They know someone's talking. I heard it myself. Pastor Alden said, we will smoke out the rat. Grandma's blood ran cold. And you think they will come for me? Daniel grabbed her hand, knuckles white. They have done worse. Be careful. Don't trust anyone, not your kin, not your friends. They will twist anyone they can. And whatever you do, don't let them. Know you have those papers. She felt the chill crawl through her bones. The house she'd lived in for 40 years suddenly felt smaller, thinner. The air was too still, like the quiet before a storm. She wasn't just a widow anymore. She was prey. 2 days later, they came. The church elders, 3 of them, arrived in black suits and righteous smiles. Their shoes clicked against the floorboards like a judge's gavel. They sat in her parlor, hands folded, Bibles resting on their knees. Mrs. Hale, the eldest said, his tone gentle but cold, it's time to finalize the Lord's work. The Good Shepherd calls his flock to obedience. Surely you would not wish to delay his blessings? Grandma's pulse pounded in her ears. She smiled sweetly. Of course. I only need to pray a little longer. His lips tightened. Don't wait too long, sister. Doubt is the devil's favored him. When they left, her knees nearly gave out. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard. They were pushing now. Pressuring. Which meant they were afraid. And fear, she thought grimly, was something she could use. That night, the store rolled in, wind howling, windows rattling like old bones. Daniel appeared at her door one last time, soaked to the skin, face pale as wax. They have started asking questions about me, he gasped. They know someone gave you the papers. Sister, you have to be careful. They know you are onto them. The lantern between them flickered, painting his face half in light, half in shadow. Grandma's heart thundered, but her voice was calm, steel wrapped in silk. She reached under the floorboard and touched the envelope hidden there. They think I'm just an old widow, she murmured. But I have buried men stronger than them before. Outside, the thunder cracked. The storm screamed through the trees, as if the world itself was warning her. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the war. Underscore 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 courtrooms are just another kind of pulpit, where truth must preach louder than lies. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood, dust, and secrets too old to confess. Sunlight spilled through the high windows, cutting across rows of wooden benches like divine judgment. Every whisper became an echo. Every breath sounded guilty. Grandma sat near the front, her spine straight, her gloved hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked like a frail widow clinging to dignity, but beneath that calm exterior, her pulse thudded with quiet fire. Across the aisle sat Pastor Alden and his entourage, 3 elders, 4 lawyers, all dressed in black suits that gleamed like polished armor. Their briefcases rested at their feet, neat and ominous. They smiled too much. The kind of smiles that prayed only for themselves. Daniel sat beside her, his hands trembling slightly as he arranged the papers he had risked his life to keep. His face was pale, but his eyes, though weary, carried the fragile courage of a man seeking redemption. You ready? He whispered. Grandma gave a faint smile. As I will ever be. Let's see if justice still listens to the old. The judge entered with the slow, heavy steps of a man who had seen too much deceit dressed as devotion. His silver hair glinted under the lights, and his gavel struck once, sharp, commanding silence. Case 472, the clerk read aloud. Hale versus Alden Ministries. The Chitch's lead attorney rose first, tall, smooth, and practiced. His voice carried the oily confidence of a man who had never known doubt. Your Honor, he began, this is a simple matter. Our beloved Sister Hale, moved by her faith and devotion, chose to leave her estate to Alden Ministries. We are merely here to confirm her charitable intent and protect her legacy from confusion or manipulation. He turned toward Grandma with a polite nod, his smirk barely restrained. To him, she was already a relic, harmless, predictable, defeated. Then Grandma's lawyer stood. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a razor's tongue. His voice was sharp, every syllable a blade. Your Honor, this is not charity. This is coercion, dressed in scripture. We will show this court that Alden Ministries orchestrated a deliberate, deceptive scheme to strip a widow of her life's work. A low murmur rippled through the spectators. Even the judge's eyebrows twitched. Pastor Alden folded his hands, his smile tightening like a noose. The first act belonged to the church. Their lawyers moved like a choir, rehearsed, polished, in perfect deceitful harmony. A stack of neatly bound documents slid across the polished oak table. The lead attorney adjusted his tie and gestured grandly. Mrs. Hale's donation agreement, he declared. Signed, dated, and notarized. Her signature is clear. Her faith, unquestionable. Her generosity, undeniable. He let the papers rest there like holy scripture, basking in their own false authority. Gasps fluttered through the pews. Even some of Grandma's distant cousins exchanged uncertain looks. The perfect widow, giving everything to the church. It sounded almost believable. But Grandma only adjusted her shawl, her eyes steady and cold. She had learned long ago, liars always speak first. Her lawyer rose. Your Honor, signatures can be faked. But the truth? The truth leaves fingerprints too deep to hide. He nodded toward Daniel, who rose from the bench like a ghost, finally finding the courage to speak. Mr. Price, the lawyer said, please tell the court your former position. Daniel cleared his throat. I was the senior accountant for Alden Ministries for 12 years. And why did you leave? Daniel hesitated. Because I couldn't live with the lies anymore. He turned toward the judge, his voice cracking but growing steadier with each word. I saw the ledgers. Donations diverted into private accounts. Signatures duplicated. Wills rewritten. They targeted the vulnerable, widows, mostly. And when I refused to stay quiet, they threatened me. Told me my silence was a test of faith. Gasps filled the courtroom. One of the church lawyers shot to his feet. Objection. This is hearsay, overruled, the judge thundered. Let him speak. Daniel swallowed hard. Your Honor, I brought the records. The originals. Not the doctored ones they filed. He opened a folder, yellowed pages, stained edges, but alive with truth. The courtroom fell into an electric silence. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to pause. Grandma's lawyer took over, his voice slicing through the tension. And what of the payments, Mr. Price? Daniel hesitated, then nodded. There were transfers, from church accounts to family members of targeted donors. To persuade them. He didn't need to say names. Grandma already knew. Her nephew, sitting 2 rows back, flinched, his jaw locking. Her daughter-in-law shifted uncomfortably, staring at the floor. Then her lawyer laid out the receipts, wire transfers from the Chitch's discretionary fund straight into her nephew's account. Compensation for ministry assistance. The judge's face darkened. Gasps erupted again, louder now, fueled by outrage and disbelief. A woman in the back stood and muttered, Lord have mercy. Another relative stood suddenly, pointing at the nephew. You sold her out. For a handful of blood money? Sit down. The judge roared, his gavel cracking like thunder. There will be order in this court. Grandma sat still through it all, not triumphant, not broken, simply resolute. Her heart hurt for her family, but her eyes stayed forward. She wasn't here for vengeance. She was here for truth. Then came the moment that shifted the air. Her lawyer turned to the judge. Your Honor, before this court passes judgment, there is one final document you need to see. He held up a single yellowed sheet, edges curled, ink faded, but power undiminished. This, he said softly, is an amendment. Handwritten and signed by the late Mr. Hale. It was notarized and witnessed. It states, in unmistakable terms, that if any act of coercion, deceit, or undue influence is ever proven in the handling of his estate, all related claims are null and void. A stunned hush swept the courtroom. The judge reached out, slowly, carefully, as if touching something sacred. His eyes moved line by line. The silence thickened, heavy, expectant. Across the aisle, Pastor Alden's mask cracked. His jaw twitched. His fingers gripped the armrest, knuckles white. Grandma watched him without blinking. Finally, he knew she had beaten him at his own game. The judge exhaled heavily, setting the paper down with reverence. If this document holds up, he said slowly, then Alden Ministries stands guilty of fraud. Serious fraud. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered. Others cursed. A dozen reporters scrambled for notes. Pastor Alden stood abruptly, red-faced, voice trembling with fury. This is a fabrication. You have no proof that. The gavel slammed again, harder this time. Sit down, Pastor, the judge ordered. You have preached enough for one lifetime. The pastor froze, the room watching him fall silent for the first time in years. The judge turned toward Grandma. His tone softened, almost respectful. Mrs. Hale, we will recess for review. But I will say this, I have seen many wolves for wool in this courtroom. Not many have faced the shepherd. As the crowd slowly emptied, Grandma stayed seated. The echoes of the gavel still hung in the air. Daniel leaned toward her, whispering, You did it. You turned the tide. But Grandma didn't smile. Her eyes stayed fixed on Pastor Alden, who stood by the exit, staring back at her, not beaten, not broken, but calculating. She knew that look. She had seen it before, in men who believed they were untouchable. Her fingers brushed the edge of her shawl, hiding the tremor in her hand. This isn't over, she murmured. Wolves don't leave the flock because the gate's locked. They find another way in. The thunder rolled outside, echoing like an omen. And as the courthouse doors swung open to the storm, Grandma stepped out, her resolve steel hard. The trial might have paused. But the war for her legacy had only just begun. Underscore 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 underscore. They wanted my name in their book, but instead, it's carved in history. The courtroom had never been so still. For weeks, whispers of scandal had fluttered through the town, from church pews to coffee shops, from barber shops to backyards. But today, the truth wasn't whispered. It thundered. Stacks of evidence lay before the judge, forged signatures, fake seals, and paper trails that reeked of sanctified greed. And in the middle of it all sat me, a tired widow in a maroon coat, clutching my worn leather handbag like a shield. They wanted me broken. They wanted my silence. But I was about to watch their empire crumble, piece by holy piece. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing like a church bell tolling for the guilty. Counsel, he said coldly, explain why this so-called clause, intended to protect the church, now exposes a trail of fraudulent estate transfers. One of the Chitch's lawyers blanched, fumbling through papers that could no longer protect him. Another dabbed sweat from his temple, his mouth twitching as he searched for lies that would not come. They had built their kingdom on deception, and the walls were finally falling. The clause they drafted to seize my estate had been turned inside out by one line, my late husband's handwritten amendment. Their greed blinded them so completely, they never saw the trap they themselves had signed. I could almost hear him in my heart, my herald, saying softly, "Never keep all your eggs in one basket, love. Especially when snakes are nesting in the hay." Across the aisle, the church elders shifted in their seats. Their gold crosses gleamed under the light, but their faces were gray with fear. Their pastor, once so smug, so sanctimonious, stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his face suddenly very quiet. And my family? The ones who had traded blood for blessings? They could not even look at me. I almost petted them. Almost. The prosecutor rose and began to read aloud the list of properties donated under identical clauses: widows, veterans, single mothers, all stripped of their inheritance in the name of God. Every word hit like thunder. Every name was a ghost called back to demand justice. A man in the gallery stood up, his voice shaking. So it wasn't divine will, he shouted, it was greed. Gasps filled the room before the bailiff guided him out gently, but the damage was done. The illusion had shattered. Behind me, one of my nephews, the same one who once promised to help me through the paperwork, hung his head. His signature was right there on a bank transfer to the church. His betrayal had been bought cheap. I looked at him, not with rage, but with clarity. Family doesn't mean loyalty, I thought. Sometimes it just means proximity to the knife. Daniel, the accountant who had risked everything to expose them, sat beside me, pale, trembling, but resolute. He whispered, "You did it, Mrs. Hale." I shook my head slightly. "No, Daniel. We did." By the time the judge spoke again, the courtroom was shaking under the weight of truth. "If this evidence holds," he said gravely, "then Alden Ministries stands accused of systemic fraud, falsified documentation, and coercion. And those responsible will face criminal charges." The words didn't just strike the church, they detonated it. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and the holy man who once stood above reproach now sat exposed under the harsh light of justice. By the next morning, their gilded banners still hung outside the chapel, but the people no longer bowed beneath them. Congregants who once sang their praises now turned their backs. Donations dried up, and the choir that had once filled the hall with hymns now sang to a sea of empty pews. Their fall was swift and silent, like a prayer that God refused to hear. When the ruling came, I didn't cheer. I just closed my eyes and let the words settle over me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The clause was void. My estate, safe. My name, cleared. But the victory wasn't just mine. Dozens of families wronged before me were finally given a voice. Their stolen homes, their stripped inheritances, all ordered for restitution. The same people they called foolish widows and senile elders now stood as witnesses to justice. I had won, not because I was fearless, but because I refused to be quiet. Still, when the dust settled, I realized the victory left me with a choice. What good is justice if you stop using it once your name is cleared? Weeks later, I stood inside a modest community hall, walls painted beige, tables mismatched, the air thick with the smell of stew and fresh bread. "This," I said to the gathered crowd, "is what faith looks like when it feeds instead of feeds on." There were no polished sermons, no golden chalices, just tired hands serving food and soft eyes shining with gratitude. I donated not to rebuild my image, but to rebuild hope. Shelters, schools, food banks, all places that asked for nothing but enough to keep their lights on. When the newspapers printed the story, "Widow donates half her fortune to local charities," some of my relatives sneered. "She's giving it all away," one of them hissed. "After all that fight, for this?" Let them sneer. They will never understand the freedom that comes from giving on your own terms. For once, my money wasn't being vultured over, it was nourishing lives. And maybe, just maybe, that's what real legacy means. I sit now by the same window where I once prayed for peace. The light falls across my garden, the one they almost stole, and the wind hums through the trees like an old hymn. Faith, betrayal, foresight. Those are the three pillars that rebuilt my world. Faith, not in men, not in robes, not in rituals, but in the quiet strength that whispers when everyone else calls you foolish. Betrayal, sharp, painful, but honest. It taught me who deserved my table and who deserved my distance. And foresight, the gift of listening to your instincts before the storm hits. I had not been paranoid. I had been prepared. The church dissolved within months. Some of its leaders were arrested. Others fled. Their legacy now sits in legal textbooks under the heading Case Study in Religious Fraud. My nephews? They drift between guilt and silence. One sent a letter of apology and signed. Another moved out of town, unable to walk into the grocery store without hearing whispers. But there were others who stood by me, neighbors, old friends, even strangers who said, "You gave us courage." Those became my new family. The kind built not on blood, but on truth. 1 year later, I visited the old wooden bridge behind my house, the one Harold built when our boys were young. The planks creaked under my feet, worn smooth by years of footsteps and rain. I leaned on the railing, looking down at the water, and thought about everything I had lost, and everything I had reclaimed. I took out one last copy of the forged deed, the paper that nearly ended me, and let it fall into the river. It drifted downstream, ink bleeding into the current, dissolving like a bad memory finally released. A soft smile touched my lips. They tried to write me out of history, I whispered. But history had other plans. The wind carried the words away, rippling the water like applause. They tried to steal in God's name. But in the end, only justice was served.